Ballied Up rappers 1, Kemi Badenoch 0. Today, the UK government decided not to contest a discrimination case brought by the Belfast rap group Kneecap, saying that it would not be, quote, in the public interest. So, what kicked it all off? Back in December 2023, Kneecap applied for a grant offered to UK-registered artists. Their application was approved by the British phonological industry, and they were meant to be given just over £14,000. But it was blocked by none other than Kemi Badenoch, who was the business minister at the time. The Guardian reported this last June. A spokesperson said the government did not want to give taxpayers' money to people that oppose the United Kingdom itself. Now, I'm no fancy big city lawyer, but that seems like a pretty clear-cut case of discriminating against artists because of their political beliefs. Nowhere does it say that people who believe in Irish reunification shouldn't be recipients of taxpayer funding, particularly when a significant number of taxpayers in the north of Ireland are themselves Irish Republicans. Here's Kneecap arriving at court this morning and then giving a statement after the UK government conceded their case.
Today, unsurprisingly, the British government's own courts ruled that they acted illegally in stopping funding to Kneecap. For us, this action was never about £14,250. Could have been 50 pence. The motivation was equality. This was an attack on artistic culture, an attack on the Good Friday Agreement itself, and an attack on Kneecap and our way of expressing ourselves. Today, we will send the full amount awarded to 2 youth organisations in Belfast who will work with the 2 communities to create a better future for our young people. £7,125 will go to Glornamona and Ballymurphy, and £7,125 will go to our city, Belfast, on the Shankill Road, and that's the deposit we got for it. The former Secretary of State, Kemi Badenoch, and her department acted unlawfully, and this is now a fact. They don't like that we oppose British rule, that we don't believe that England serves anyone in Ireland, and the working classes on both sides of the community deserve better. They deserve funding, they deserve appropriate mental health services, and they deserve to celebrate music and art, and deserve the freedom to express our culture. They broke their own laws in trying to silence Kneecap. The reason for this was that they didn't like our art, in particular our beautiful 2019 tour poster of Boris Johnson on a rocket. They didn't like our views, in particular our opposition to a United Kingdom and our belief in a United Ireland, which is our right to do. They didn't like the fact that we're totally opposed to all they represent, embodied right now by their arming of genocide in Gaza. What they did was a fascist type action, attempting to block art that does not agree with their views after an independent body made a decision. Their own courts have now found in Kneecap's favour, as we knew they would. They tried to silence us, and they have failed. We wish to give a massive thanks to our lawyer, Darragh Mackin, and our barristers, Joe Brawley and Ronan Lavery. They told us at the outset that this was a penalty kick without a goalkeeper, and it sure was. Back on net. Seriously, I'm Palestine, free Palestine.
I just wanted to show you that whole video because you can see Kneecap rolling up in a Royal Ulster Constabulary Jeep, which is basically a symbol of colonial oppression and police brutality. So a real case of reclaiming something, and it's very punk. It's very punk. I'm into it. Taking the L as gracefully as always was Tory leader Kemi Badenoch. Her spokesperson said this. This case is not about whether a band promotes violence or hates the UK, as Kneecap clearly do. This is about whether government ministers have the ability to stop taxpayers' money subsidising people who neither need nor deserve it. Labour would rather waste your money than stand up to a group of Irish Republicans who go to court because the UK government won't hand them cash. The spokesperson added that, quote, Labour will always capitulate rather than defend UK interests. And Badenoch herself described the move as, quote, yet another cowardly decision after giving away the Chagos Islands. Aaron, the Tories have been banging on about politicised threats to free speech, but it looks a lot like the call is coming from inside the House.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ash. Also, it's really important to say here, this is not a decision that's taken by Labour. We're talking about laws which the whole country has to adhere to, and an independent judiciary. It is really remarkable, actually. I have to say that the relationship between the Tories and the Human Rights Act is just so fraught. One day they'd say we have to get rid of it, and the next you'll see somebody who's very right wing, who's lost their job. Maybe they're they might be a very hardcore Christian who said something not acceptable in a school environment. They're a teacher, for instance. They lose their job and they appeal that through using the Human Rights Act. That happens all the time. And then, of course, the Tories love them. The good old Human Rights Act. So it's a funny piece of legislation, which the right seems to love it and hate it, depending on what day of the week it is. But in terms of this particular story, really, really interesting because, of course, as you've said, Northern Irish people, their taxes are going towards the British state. Many of those people will, of course, have Republican sympathies. It really is a pretty terrifying precedent if you start to say, well, because politically you have a position which we view as at odds with the British state, therefore you cannot get any of the funding which taxpayers, who, by the way, agree with you, which would otherwise be going your way. You can imagine, for instance, a Republican. I'm a Republican, right? I don't think the UK should have a monarchy. Well, given that, the British state is fundamentally tied up with the idea of monarchy, the Crown is fundamentally the state acts on behalf of the Crown, not on behalf of the people, then I can imagine a world where somebody like Kemi Badenoch or Sola Braverman says, well, Aaron Bastani shouldn't get handouts or the NHS or access to the police and the courts because he's a Republican. Those are the Crown's courts. If you don't respect and observe the Crown, why on earth should you benefit from them? Very, very dangerous line of argument. We have equality under the law. We don't discriminate on the basis of people's political views. Somebody watching this or listening to it, they might not think that Kneecap should get those funds, but believe me, we've used this phrase a lot tonight, but it's true. That is a very slippery slope.
I mean, I also think that it's this idea that UK government money can't go towards anything which supports Irish republicanism. I mean, you might want to check out the Good Friday Agreement because the Westminster government is supposed to remain neutral in the event of a border poll.